Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling from and when you're watching this, because this is going to get posted after the fact. I've actually got a couple of the Power Apps team with me. Actually, I guess it's just me and you, Per. So Per just joined. He actually runs the ALM team and a lot of the features as far as what you're looking at for like build integration and Visual Studio integration. That's Per. And then we've got BJ and we've got Brian, who actually build Power Apps in anger. Interesting term, in anger. I presented that to a European, and they're like, "What does that mean?" That means they do that as a part of their full-time job. BJ is the program manager, goes out gets the requirements, etc. And Brian's the operations manager, and he's the guy that makes sure that this thing stays running, takes a look at the telemetry, and then optimizes it so it's a better experience. So what is the it, and what application are we looking at today? So we didn't talk about who I'm going to hand it to, but VJ, I think it's you that's going to walk us through what are we looking at and what Power Apps did you guys build? What are we going to look at today?
Thanks, Charles. I'm Vijay. We represent Microsoft retail stores. Um, and what we did was we had a problem statement in answer desk area, which primarily deals with customer appointments that are scheduled from online or walk-ins in the store, where a customer has some issue with their device or any software-related issue that they want Microsoft product advisors to fix. Um, that's the team we represent. Um, so let me explain the problem here and what we did about it. So this is the Microsoft Online store location page. You can come in here. A customer can schedule an appointment based on the location of them. They can pick a store where the appointment goes in. And at the time of appointment, we ask very basic information from the customer in terms of what the issue is, and at some point, the appointment is scheduled for a 15 minutes duration when a customer actually shows up in the store. And that's where all the magic from the Power App comes in. So the scenario is the appointment has happened, the customer shows in the store, and we process that appointment. Now there's a lot of uncertainty and compliance related to an appointment. When I say uncertainty is we don't know what device they are talking about. We don't know what the depth of the problem is. So it's really to have an 15 minutes appointments and to be able to manage it within 15 minutes is quite challenged because of the uncertainty of issue that's possible. And the second is we are dealing with customer data here. Customer information as well as device are something that we want to ensure we are doing everything in compliance and define the boundaries, make sure it's transparent and everything is done in a compliant way. So I'll go a little bit more in depth in terms of what the business problem is. Um, so Microsoft stores right now are almost managing 700,000 customer appointments every day in a compliant manner. That's the scale of it. Um, as explained, the processing of these appointments needs to be compliant from a privacy and security aspects. Underlying system that where the appointments get created and managed is through Dynamics product. And the workflows that are built around to ensure we capture every aspect of the appointment and the customer details are quite complex if you work in Dynamics. They are extensive, and that's where the complexity comes in, which adds to the problem, and we'll talk about that. And the fourth piece is to achieve compliance, we have to get a waiver signed for which we were using an external service, which was adding to the time. So overall, what we saw is under this problem statement, the issue that we were seeing is most of the appointments were actually going over 15 minutes. The second is we are looking at almost 100 plus stores, and when the way product advisors were using Dynamics to do the workflows, we saw a tendency to miss out filling some information, which is important. So we saw inconsistent use. The DocuSign service that we were using to get the waiver sign for the appointment was absolutely time consuming and tedious. And the last piece was the out-of-box telemetry that we were getting from Dynamics to understand. So the appointment processing has different action points, and we were not getting a clear measurement of in terms of which part is where we're spending most time. For example, when somebody shows up, there are a few steps involved. The customer checks in. The next part is we get customer information. Then we take customer device information. Then we get scope of work, and then we do the document signing. These 4 parts. So to understand which part is where most time is spent is a very important piece of information. So the telemetry that we were getting from Dynamics out of box was not providing these details. So having defined the scope of the problem and the challenges, what we did is we built an PowerApp. What that PowerApp did is it reduced the appointment processing time to less than 5 minutes in over 70% of the appointment. The uncertainty of the appointment, what kind of work is engaged, still kept the 30% of them over 5 minutes, but the process flow of collecting all the customer information and waiver signing, we could reduce to less than 5 minutes for 70% of the appointments. And also we went a step forward by enhancing the telemetry so that we can actually see how much time we are spending in each action. And if we see there is an area of improvement in certain actions, we actually work on it. Just to showcase this part how the end result looks. This is a telemetry that comes from the PowerApp. And if you look at it, I'm looking at 1st May till today, and we're looking at all the stores. These are 3 appointment types that are completed with us, and 61% are less than 5 minutes. 26% are between 6 and 5 minutes. So hitting these 2 numbers is absolutely on, because we are scheduling the appointment for 15 minutes. These are the ones that goes over is where sometimes what we see is we take the device, we try to solve it, and the problem is much bigger. So we have to go back to the customer saying, hey, you need to drop the device and have come back. So overall, that back and forth does take it over 15 minutes. That's by design. I don't think PowerApp can solve that problem. But overall, if you can see, we are looking at around 86% of them falling below 15 minutes, which is great. Before the PowerApp, the number for this, which we had to calculate manually, was we were spending over 12 minutes even before the document was signed. So the information that we have is even before we could touch the device, we had already spent 12 minutes. So this is a huge improvement. So now to take it forward, now let's dig in terms of what is this PowerApp, how does it work, what kind of technology or the feature set that PowerApps provide us that are used. I will pass it on to Brian, and he'll take you in details with it.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian Blanchard. I'm an engineer on the Microsoft retail team. And as soon as my sharing comes up here. Go. So what you're seeing here is our homepage for our Adapt app. And essentially what happens is the associate will come into the store that they work in, open the app, and this will automatically default to the store that they work in. And they can change stores by clicking the drop down here and selecting a different store, as well as change dates. Maybe they want to look at future appointments or something like that. But essentially it defaults to the date, the today, and the person that's there. What you'll see on the main thing is all the appointments that we have. And to the right, you'll see metadata on those appointments. You see a confirmation number, customer name, email, store, and who it's assigned to, and a customer description if they actually fill one out. We have different tabs that you can look at here about in the stages of the actual appointment. And so we have a concept called check-in. What would happen is you would go to the store and say, I'm here. They would check you in, and the next available associate would work with you. And while your appointment is in progress, your While you move through the stages, your appointment becomes in an in-progress state, and you'll see a little bit about that later on. They also have the ability to cancel appointments if people don't show, and then we have a tab that shows all appointments. The interesting part about this scenario here is we needed to have configuration data for production and dev. They're different settings. So what we did is we created an Azure table storage and linked it to the application, and it loads the appropriate settings for that environment. And that looks a little bit like this. So here you can see the URL to Dynamics. You can see if telemetry is enabled, the environment, and the refresh duration. And so we have the exact same settings, well, not setting values, but same settings in our production version of the table storage. So typically the way this works is, I'm going to refresh. You would come in for your appointment. The associate would find you in the list and check you in. And we have a process where you can check in or check in and start. For this scenario, we're just going to go ahead and check in and start the case because I'm the person that's checking you in and doing your case. And what's happening in the background here is it's calling a flow to update Dynamics 365 and a little bit of our workflow process in the background to tell the case of what status it's in. The next screen you'll see, you'll come up to validate customer details. You make sure that all this is filled out correctly, you confirm with the customer, and you're able to update and add things here. You also are able to see their device details. These are all the devices that they've checked in with before or that we know about. You're able to add a device. Which will show up in the bottom of the list or top of the list, sorry, here, as well as you're able to make changes to the device information. Now, what we've done with this application is provide breadcrumbs to Dynamics 365 the entire way. So if there was some more data I wanted to update on the customer details that we don't provide in this interface, you can simply click on the Go to Retail CRM link, and it should take you to Dynamics. Except it's a little slow today. There we go. So we didn't restrict them from using Dynamics 365. We just gave them an interface on top of that, which allows them to work the process faster. Because originally they would have to go to Dynamics 365, open up all these different pages to get the correct information filled out. So I'm going to close that, move on. All the data is good. We're going to put new device. I'm going to hit save and continue. Then they're going to come to the scope of work page. Customer report an issue, having an issue logging in. Scope of work. So here the associate would just do a refresh of the OS. It is a front of house process, which that means we can take care of it without bringing your computer in. The associate would go ahead and submit, and this will come to our WAF page, our workflow authorization form. This is where the customer would have to initial and sign to make sure that we can do the work for them. And the way we've done this is we have created we have an Azure Blob storage where the initials and the signatures are written. And then on the back of this, it's called a flow, which has the HTML for this actual form. And it puts it all together and sends it to an Azure function that converts it to a PDF, which then connects it to the CRM case or the Dynamics 365 case. I'll go ahead and do that now. And originally using DocuSign, this would take about 2 minutes. And this process is a lot faster. Now, if you notice, our case is going to move to in progress, or it should have, and there it is. I'm going to go to the retail case so you can see how the flow is actually attaching the PDF to the actual case itself. Here's my signed PDF. And so with using PowerApps Flow and an Azure function, we were able to get away from the DocuSign process and having all that back-end stuff there. And we've also increased the speed of this. Now, during every step of this process, or at least most steps of the process, like VJ mentioned, we have telemetry. And telemetry is built into our application for every time it calls a flow. And what these flow looks like, we have a custom connector that takes the telemetry data, which calls another Azure function and puts it in the application insights. And the flow looks like this. We also capture telemetry errors as well as feedback. So all of that goes in application insights. And what we're capturing is the event name, the store, the application. I'll just do it like that, that'll be better. And all this delta information that we need to correlate our events to see if we're succeeding or failing. And the other way you can look at this data is you can query application insights using the browser or Visual Studio. And what you'll see is custom events that come in. So based on the flow we call, it creates the right event for the actual activity that it's running. And it gives us the same metadata inside here, including the user alias that helps us figure out who was doing what at the store.
And I use actually Power BI to look at all my application insights data. So I love application insights. I'm a huge fan.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Brian.
No, that's perfect. Because another thing we do with this application insights is we take this data and not just look at it in Power BI, but I have a flow that calls application insights and takes some of the data I want and puts it into a SQL database where we have another app that analyzes this data. So we kind of get it in both ends, which is really nice. The other thing that's interesting is about the configuration data is our WAFs, our workflow authorization forms. Now, based on the country, we have different specifications and languages that we have to do. So I'm going to go to Puerto Rico here and go through this process again. Just going to pick the defaults here. Now you notice on this WAF, this is not in English. So for our Puerto Rico store, we needed things, CELA wanted them to be to match what they do in the country. Well, I guess it's in the state. And the interesting part about this is all configuration data. So we don't have to modify the app to change this language. If they wanted to change something, all we'd have to do is come into our table storage here and modify the data inside here, which each of the different areas of the WAF. So if you notice here, back power, AC power for English, and then I'm not sure how to pronounce that for Spanish. But the rest of the workflow works the same way, just adds the PDF and goes to the Azure function. The other thing that's been really beneficial for us that I recommend everyone do is have feedback built in directly to your application. So down here we have a feedback button, and we allow the associates to tell us what they like and what they don't like, or give us feature requests, which is really driven where we're taking this application. Nice thing about this feedback is we didn't have to do anything special. We just wired it up to the same application insights that we're using to collect the error telemetry as well as the regular telemetry. So all of that flows right into our Power BI or wherever else we want it to go. Feedback submitted. And that is the main features of this application.
That's very cool. And did you build a lot of this, or who actually did a lot of that building?
That was me. I built the majority of it. We had a designer help design it, and I built it.
And which is kind of cool, because I introduced you as a operations engineer. So do you have a formal development background? I guess I could have asked these questions before the call.
That's fair. No, I don't have a formal development background, but the majority of my work was in automation and tooling. So I spent a lot of time in C#, a lot of time in PowerShell, and a lot of time coding, but I don't develop applications every day.
Got it. Okay. And I see I've got a couple of people on the call. Somebody from Florida. Any other questions for Brian before we hand it back to VJ? No? Okay. So what else do we want to take a look at other areas?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can go through completing a ticket, showing ways.
Yeah, we can do that again. And while you're showing the creation of the ticket, you guys actually are on the call and watch the recording. You guys can actually go out and use this application right now. This is actually something that you guys could go to the store.microsoft.com, click on locations, and click on create help desk, and you can actually look at it right now. It's in production, and I know that the last 20% takes 80% of the time, Brian. How long would it take you to get that very first, where you could kind of make it go and you could see where it was working?
Oh, 3 days.
3 days. Holy cow. Okay.
This is probably the third iteration of it, but yeah, 3 days to actually get 90% of it working. The WAF and the Azure Functions took a little bit longer because that wasn't part of the first requirements. But yes, to meet our goals, it was 3 days for the first round.
So I'll come in and add more to it. I think there's a fantastic story that goes behind how we went about doing this. This actually the reason we worked on this Power App was part of a Shark Tank effort in Microsoft stores, and the proposal was made in identifying an area where we can make a significant impact. That's how the idea originated. And so it was my idea. I worked with Brian as Power App being a potential candidate to solve it. And actually, Brian did turn around like 3-4 iterations of different versions of app doing different level of functionality. So I want to add on to what Brian said, that it took him 3-4 days to come back. We basically did 3-4 iterations. How the idea started first to how the idea what we have in production has gone through a lot of changes. So we did few iterations, but once we were on it, that this is the scope of work. This is what we're trying to resolve. I think he just took it for a notch above to make sure he understood the requirement and then how in Power Apps we can do efficiently. For example, the document signing work that we were paying DocuSign to sign for this thing being done in Power Apps was a killer feature because it reduced times, reduced cost, and it's so much simpler.
Then also, you mentioned something almost in passing, VJ, that's really, really important. A lot of people take for granted here at other companies. The way we do a lot of, and I'm using the air quote, training at Microsoft is hackathons and Shark Tanks and these, we call them spikes, if you will, in the agile parlance. And what they do is they go out and say, hey, your normal job is an operations manager or a program manager in my case, but we're going to actually have a week a year where you can go out and do something that you're just absolutely passionate about and actually try and solve some problem that may not be your core competency, i.e. Brian writing code or Chuck writing code. I've written some applications, and some of the things that you see from Microsoft, I'm on the Power BI team, like the themes for dashboards. If you've ever played with that, that was a result of actually, I think it was an Outlook program manager decided he really wanted to go out and change the way that Power BI is done. So you guys actually listening to this, I do recommend for non-traditional education ways of training people and enabling them to actually solve problems, try a hackathon, or you guys called it a Shark Tank. Is that what you called it, VJ?
Yes, we started as a Shark Tank. That's correct.
Yeah, so great way. And I know that if you want to watch a video on just that and how one of our organizations use that to teach their employees Power BI and Power Apps, King's College in the UK, Matt Gordon didn't know anything about PowerApps. So what he did was he actually created a hackathon and said, hey, let's go out and create an application about this. And they literally crowdsourced their own education into PowerApps. And now they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, great stuff. Anyways, Brian, I think I cut you off ad nauseum at this point.
No, it's not a problem. I'm just going to walk through one of the flows and give some other best practices. A lot of times we have custom connectors. So here's a flow from my convert to PDF. It takes a simple WAF input. And what this is just HTML. Is built into my switch. Sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this. I have different HTMLs for the different areas for the WAF because of the way they're supposed to be written. And a lot of things that you want to do when you're using flows is create your variables here and pass them at the beginning as opposed to just adding your variables within your different places. So what I mean by that is I have my machine I'm passing. I ask for that variable in PowerApps, and then I see it in the UI. So I can actually see what it's looking for versus just if I was in create a new record or something like that, the field name. So it makes it a lot easier to do that. But if we look at the flow here, yeah, I covered that. The other thing is we do have custom connectors for this, which are, this is my telemetry connectors, where this is, you create the connector so you can pass the data to the actual Azure function, and it's calling these APIs, which are locked down via Azure authentication. So there's no codes or anything that can be a security risk.
And additionally, we were talking about this before the call. This application, by the way, is run in a tenant dedicated to the application. So we actually we have DLP settings where you can't do the things inside of Microsoft, and this is why they're in a tenant dedicated to this application. Very, very safe and secure doing it that way.
Yes.
In fact, a very interesting fact is this is the most launched Power App right now across the board.
I did not know that. I would have guessed it would be the Thrive app inside of Microsoft. We're gonna get Pat Dunn to go out and walk us through that. So he's playing second fiddle to you guys. That's cool. Well, okay.
Yeah. To be fair, we're in third place right now, VJ, based on this month, but we are still above Thrive.
Okay.
Yeah, the Thrive has more users and we have more sessions.
All right. So I owe everybody listening a walkthrough of what Thrive is. Thrive is a pretty cool internal. So you can't use it yet, but the Pat has actually promised that he's actually going to make it available as a gallery sample. So that's very cool. Okay. So we're going to do this as a multi-part. We're obviously going to look at maybe some other areas later on. I'm going to hand it back to VJ and Brian to close and thank them for their time. Guys, I really, really do appreciate it. And then also, I realized that a bunch of attendees had problems getting in because of the attendee link. It looks like Teams actually only let our organization members in. So I have to go back and talk to the teams and make sure we unwind that as well. But again, I apologize for people that couldn't get in or watching it as a recording. And this is going to be available on the Microsoft Power Platform YouTube channel. BJ?
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for the opportunity. And I highly encourage people to look at Power Apps an option to build their workforce solutions. The business workflows that they need an app for. I think Power App is a perfect platform for that.
Okay. And then Brian, you talked about multi-part. Are we going to be able to talk you into maybe just doing some application insights, wiring up, or get Todd on that call and see how you guys did that?
I think that would be fun to go through that whole process and just do a lot like what Shane does and just build it from the ground up so everybody can see how that works.
That would be amazing. And I see Todd's on the call. It would be great to actually get you guys paired up and actually doing that together. I know that Todd just did a blog post. I actually saw a blog post on it. So he's clearly ready. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate the time and I'm looking forward to the next one. And actually, I'm going to have this posted probably the next hour or so.
Again.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you again.